So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can add what's called a nose bridge onto a store-bought face mask. Because most of the face masks that you buy in stores won't come with a wire or any type of metal to help shape this around your nose. And if you wear these masks, you might notice there's a big gap between your nose and the actual fabric. And that kind of defeats the purpose of wearing the mask then, because whatever germs you're breathing out are then going to escape out that top part. Also, if you wear glasses or sunglasses, some people have commented that they find that their glasses get fogged up because when they breathe out, their condensation then goes up out through the top of the mask and then fogs up their glasses. So by putting in a nose wire, you can help cut back on that problem. Now, I tried doing some nose wires using things like bread ties or pipe cleaners or floral wire. And the problem is those are all very flimsy and you have to constantly keep shaping it to your nose. So even though you might temporarily get a bit of a seal around the top of your nose, it doesn't last very long. So I saw these online. I got a Facebook ad a couple of months ago from this company called Advanced Manufacturing, where they sell these stainless steel nose bridges. They're very sturdy. They're flexible enough that when you bend them, they will bend. But they're not so flimsy like a typical wire or a bread bag tie would be. And they sell two different styles. They sell this style, which is called their contoured style. And you can see it kind of has like a bump in the middle. And then they also sell just a regular flat style. So the flat style would be if you have a mask that has a straight edge along the top, like those pleated masks. But since the mask that I bought or that I'm showing you today is what's called a contoured mask, I'm going to use the contoured nose bridge. Now, contoured masks are the ones that are not straight across the top. These go up more on the bridge of your nose and then dip down beneath your eyes. So they're typically more comfortable because they're not going to poke you in the eye. They also tend to fit your face a little bit better because they're not just this flat piece of fabric. These masks I happened to buy at the Vera Bradley outlet. When I saw them, they were one size fits all. And since Vera Bradley designs purses, I figured, okay, one size fits all, probably designed for a female face. But they are very large and they are quite loose around my nose and around the sides of my face. So I definitely wanted to retrofit it. Now you'll notice on the piece of metal, there's two little holes, one at each end. That's that you can stitch it onto the outside of the mask. Also, if you're making your own mask, you could technically sew these on the inside, so that way it's hidden. Or in this particular case, this mask is designed with a filter pocket. So if you wanted to insert it into the filter pocket and then stitch what's called a channel, which is kind of like a little pocket on it. But that's kind of tricky to do because of the fact that this is curved. And I read online that some people are finding that it's very difficult to do on a sewing machine because it ends up breaking the needle. So instead, I am going to hand stitch this to the front. Now, even though there are holes on the two ends, it was recommended that you also tack it down in the middle. So that's where I like to start. So what's handy dandy about these contoured masks is there's typically a seam running down the middle. So I know that that's going to be my center point. So for this project, you're going to need a needle and thread. Any type of thread will do. I'm using all-purpose thread that I happen to have and a regular sewing needle. I tend to do this without any pins. If you have long pins and you want to try to pin this in place first, you can try that, but you don't really need that. So I'm going to push that out of the way. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if you want to get fancy and you don't want the knot to be on the inside of your mask, you can technically kind of fish your needle up through the filter pocket and do it that way. But I found that I don't even feel the knot, and I have very sensitive skin, even when I put it right on the inside of the mask. So you start from the back. It already has a knot. We're going to pull it all the way through until you feel that it reached that edge. And you just want to double check that you're at that center there. And when you tack something in place, it means you're just using a couple of hand stitches here to keep it in place. So I'm going to do one stitch. Do a second stitch. You're going to go coming up on the bottom right at that center seam and coming down along the top of it on the center seam. You don't want to put your wire too far down because each time you poke the needle through the fabric, you are creating a hole that particles can get through. So you don't want to put this anywhere near where your nostrils are or where your mouth is. It's very important with masks. And one more stitch. There we go. Okay, so there's our 3 stitches. Now, back when I learned how to sew in 7th grade, they always told us that rather than just making a knot on the back, you kind of put your needle underneath the stitches. You're not going through the fabric. You're just going to go under the stitches that are there. And I was taught to do it 3 times to really make it secure. So there we go. There's the 3 times. And then I could finish it off with the knot. Just simply make a little loop, pull the needle up through the center of the loop, use your fingers to kind of make sure that that knot is getting close to the fabric, not that it's way up high on your thread. And then take your scissors and trim it off. You can also trim the tail from the knot that we used at the beginning. And again, it doesn't have to look very pretty because this is the part that's going to be up against your face, so it doesn't have to look beautiful. I did choose a color of thread that matches the fabric that the outside of the fabric, so that way it kind of camouflages in. Okay, so that was our center. Now we're going to do the same thing on our 2 ends. So I already have another needle with a knot in it already. Obviously you can use one piece of thread the whole time. Just make sure that you put that knot in the end. Now, since this is contoured, you want to make sure that you're making this kind of even. The first time I did one of these, it ended up where, without me even realizing it, it was like kind of diagonal. And when I put the mask on my face, it was very obvious that it wasn't straight. So you want to make sure that even though you stitch that center part down, it is still movable. So you want to kind of hold it at that point and then kind of work your fingers over on the fabric to make sure the fabric is nice and flat. And I'm going to try and come up through that hole. This is the hardest part of the whole project, is finding that hole. And then I'm going to make a stitch that goes over the top edge. Okay, then I'm going to come back up through that hole in the nose bridge again. And again, this is probably the hardest part, is to find that little hole. There we go. Second stitch across the top, and one more across the top. So basically we're doing everything in sets of 3. There's 3. Now we're going to go in that center hole again, and now we're going to stitch down across the bottom edge of the nose bridge. So that's 1 stitch. Come back up through that center hole again. Second stitch. And one more time. Up through the center hole. And down along the bottom edge. Okay, so I did 3 stitches across the top, 3 stitches across the bottom. Flip it over, and now I'm going to, again, weave it underneath the stitches that are here without going through the fabric. And I'm going to weave it 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. Then I can make a knot. And again, these are all very basic stitches. I'm not doing anything fancy. Trim it off. Okay, so now we have it tacked down on that side. Okay, coming back over to here, we're going to do the same thing now on the other side. So again, I have my needle and thread, knot at the end. Use my fingers to kind of smooth out that fabric to make sure it's not bunched up underneath. And I'm keeping mine so that the top of this little curve here is right along the seam that's already on the mask, so that way the entire bar is beneath the seam, just because the seam is a little bit thicker, and it's just easier for this to be underneath it. So again, the hardest part is to find that little hole. There we go. Pull it till you feel the knot reach the back, and then we're going to make 3 stitches along the top. So that's 1. Here's 2. See, I'm trying to be fancy by not looking at the back, but it's definitely easier if you look at the back to see where you're going when you're trying to come up to make the stitch come back up through that hole. Now these particular nose bridges are made out of stainless steel. That means that you can put them in the washing machine and they won't rust. Some of the other nose bridges that are being sold online are made of aluminum. And aluminum's going to rust after you put it through the washing machine. So number 1, that would probably leave a rust stain on your mask. And number 2, it means you'd probably have to be continually pulling those off and restitching them, which is no fun at all. So definitely it's better to spend a little bit more money the first time around and get the ones that are made of stainless steel. Also notice that these have a rounded edge. Some of the cheaper nose bridges that are being sold online have just very squared off edges, and that's going to either poke through the fabric or poke you. Neither one of those is good. So definitely this was worth it to get the ones with the rounded edges. Okay, now if I flip over to the back, I'm going to weave under 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. Make a knot and pull it tight. Okay, then we're going to trim off our thread. We can trim off the tail from the first step. There we go. Okay, now this is going to bend around the bridge of your nose. So when you put this on your face, you're going to bend this to fit the contours of your face. This metal is actually sturdy enough that even after you take the mask off, it will still kind of retain its shape. You could probably throw it in the washing machine and it will still have its shape. So this is definitely a very sturdy piece of stainless steel. Now also another tip, when you put the mask on, if you notice that it's still loose around the sides or around the edges, what you can do, I mean, this one happens to already have a pleat here that was put on the mask, but I have found that even that's not tight enough for me. So if I wanted to, I could pinch up the 2 corners and make another pleat and stitch that, since I happen to have my needle and thread out. So that is one way that you can possibly make a mask fit your face a little bit better, because again, if there's gaps around any edge on the mask, that's how the germs are going to get out, and that's how the germs are going to get in. So it defeats the purpose of wearing a mask if it's too loose. So there you have it. Also, whenever you do any stitching on a mask, put it through the washing machine again. Even if it was your own hands touching it, you want to make things as germ-free as possible. So I'm going to put these in the washing machine on cold water and air dry them. Even though some of the masks say that you can machine dry them, elastic in a clothes dryer with heat is actually going to break down the elastic. So if you want your masks to last longer, air dry them, because that way you can make your elastic last a little bit longer.